Today we have a very, very special treat. This gentleman right here, his name is Colonel Dick Cole. A little background on him, the Doolittle Raid. Now I know a lot of people at this point in time are not too familiar with the Doolittle Raid. But the Doolittle Raid was conducted in April 18, 1942. After Pearl Harbor, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was very, very angry with the way things turned with the bombing of Pearl Harbor. It was an undeclared war, and here they are bombing us. And he wanted to retaliate. So a gentleman by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle was to lead 79 other men on 16 twin-engine bombers to attack Japan. Now, if you saw the movie Pearl Harbor, you will remember at the end of the movie where Alec Baldwin, who played Jimmy Doolittle, they took off from the aircraft carrier USS Hornet. 16 twin-engine bombers. Alec Baldwin, of course, played Jimmy Doolittle, and the guy who sat right next to him, the co-pilot, is this gentleman right here. This is Colonel Cole. Good morning, Colonel Cole. How are you doing today?
Morning. I'm okay.
You doing well?
Yeah.
Ready for Christmas?
No.
Well, I wanted to start off with, I know that there have been a lot of books, and I believe you have your own book, or there was a book written about you, but start off with so that people can get a better background on the raid. I know that Carol Glines is someone that you recommend. Is there anybody else that you recommend, or any movies that you think accurately portray the raid?
Mm-hmm. He was also a historian. I don't know how you get to be a certified historian. I guess you never get caught in a mistake.
Right. I have a couple of his books.
Yeah.
What did you think of the movie 30 Seconds Over Tokyo? Is that a good representation for people to watch?
Well, the book itself was supposed to be, and it has held up pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Authority on the raid. Truthfully.
It is a truthful
Yeah.
authority. Okay. Now, during the raid, was there any moment that stood out that you remember the most, that you will never forget?
I don't want you to think of this a smarty answer, but the most memorable thing was when my parachute opened.
When your parachute opened?
Yeah.
That's what you remember the most?
Yeah, well.
Hey, now, you bailed out in the middle of darkness.
Yeah.
Okay.
And was in the middle of the night in a big rainstorm.
Okay.
And we all had the problem of hoping that the parachute would open because we had no fuel, and we knew we were over China at 9,000 feet, and that was it. We were bailing out into unknown territory.
So you bailed out around 9,000 feet in the middle of the night in a rainstorm. Now, I read this book, and it said that you landed in a tree.
I did. I was lucky enough. I did. One of the quandary problems in that situation was, once you bail out, you have the problem, where am I going to hit? And so forth. It turned out that I was fortunate enough that I didn't touch the ground.
Right.
I ended up in a small pine tree, and in the middle of the storm, you couldn't see anything. do anything. It was wet. So I covered up myself as possible, make it as comfortable as possible, and had it down there until daybreak. The storm had abated, and I could see the ground. Everything was nice and peaceful, and I was on the side of a mountain.
Yeah. Now, from what I read, you turned your parachute into a canopy, slept in it, but you were high up in a very steep mountain.
Yeah. We all had a compass, and we knew if we walked east, we'd be walking into occupied hands, and on my part of it, I chose not to look for a railroad or a road, thinking my chances of being captured would be less.
Okay.
And so I elected to just start walking west, which was nothing but up and down.
So you avoided the roads and the railroads because you
Yeah.
knew the Japanese would be.
Yeah.
I read that some of the men that were captured, they were tried as war criminals, not as POWs, and they executed 3 of them. And one of them, I think he died of either starvation or
Bob Meter. He was from Ohio, Bob Meter.
Bob Meter?
Yeah, he died of, and he was very energetic. He kept the other 4 prisoners having hope, and he died a year and a half after the raid, and I wondered why he died of malnutrition, and the other 4, because they were all young, healthy young men going on the raid, and after he passed away, they upped the food for the other 4. They still had another year and a half to go, but there was enough that they kept them alive. But one of the raiders, Bob Barr, the other 5 alive, one of the raiders, other 4, Bob Barr was so sick that when at the end of the war, they couldn't move him for 2 weeks. So he was really on. The other guys, they were able to, they literally, they knew that the raiders were in there because Chase Nielsen, one of the only survivor from Crew 6, Hallmark's crew, had scratched on the bottom of one of the enamel cups, bombed Tokyo, April 18th, 1942. They didn't label it the Doolittle Raid till, after it happened. But that prison where they kept them, there were political prisoners also, and some of those people got out. And so one of those people happened to see the writing on the bottom of the cup. He's released like 6 months, a year or 2 later, and he reports to the United States government that there were some raiders in there, people that had bombed Tokyo. And so at the end of the war, the Japanese were famous for just going through the prison camps and murdering people. And they parachuted in, I think, 4 Japanese Americans that spoke Japanese that were basically our special forces into the camp to see if they couldn't save them, those 4 raiders, from being executed. And they're the ones that liberated the 4 that survived. Yes.
Okay. Well, now you took part in what was the most famous, I think it was the most famous raid in the Second World War, if you don't count the Hiroshima raid. But did you, when you came home, did you tell everybody? Did they all know that you participated? I mean, how were you treated? Did every girl in the city come after you saying, I want you?
Well,
what happened?
I didn't have to worry about that because initially we were told if we survived the mission, we would get to come home. But there were 26 of us that did not get to come home. And we were left in the CBI.
Which is China, India.
We were kind of in limbo, and we heard that they were looking for pilots to fly the hump. So there were 6 of us decided that's what we wanted to do. And we got checked out in the C-47, the Douglas airplane, and we flew the hump until we got to come home 14 months later. By that time, there was no real big, a lot of information about the Tokyo raid, so I didn't have to say anything, and I chose to do that.
The Raiders that got to come home did go on bond tours, and so did General Doolittle. I think General Doolittle and General Patton went on a bond tour too. But it was what happened was the Philippines were falling, and the general coming out of the Philippines, Brereton, had brought his planes up to India and was supposed to be there for a while, but he saw how discombobulated it was in India fighting the war in China, because like Dad said, the headquarters of the 10th Air Force was 1,000 miles away from where they were actually doing any work. And so Brereton just got ticked off and took his planes, which was mainly B-24s, I think, and a few B-17s, and went to Africa, because the Operation Torch was starting up.
Right.
They were starting to get together, and if they hadn't gone on the raid, all the Doolittle Raiders would have been in Operation Torch, and the Raiders that came back to the States do go to North Africa with the beginning of Operation Torch in November of '42.
Okay. So after the raid, you were in China for about what? How long would you say?
14 months.
For 14 months?
15 months, yeah.
Okay, and then
India and China.
India and China. Okay.
Their bases, the AVG had bases in China. And in order, the Burma Road had fallen just about the time the raid happened, okay, May of '42. There was no way to get supplies in, because Rangoon fell too, to the Japanese. So they couldn't come in from the bottom, and so they had to go over the top. And that's when they started the air transport. The Doolittle Raid is Project 1. The air transport is Project 7. D-Day is Project 4, and the aerial invasion of Burma, which Dad was involved in, was Project 9. I don't know what the other projects were. One was the pipeline. They thought they'll build a pipeline into China instead of flying the hump, since it was so dangerous. But that one never got happened. But I've never found Project 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6.
Okay.
So anyway, so they got left in China and India.
In India. Now, when you trained, how did you just volunteer? How did you get become part of this whole mission? Did you know what the mission was about, or did you just know that, hey, I'm going to be flying with Colonel Doolittle, and I'd like to try it out?
Oh yeah. Well, when they were looking for volunteers, the whole group volunteered. And out of the whole group volunteered, I don't have any idea why we were chosen. Who chose us, and what we're supposed to do, and so forth. I don't know. Okay. We just ended up there.
So when did you know that did you first hear that we were actually bombing Japan?
2 days at sea after we left Alameda, the PA system said, came on and said, this force is bound for Tokyo. And then the only people that knew that was Doolittle and the hierarchy. And none of us thought we were going to. The main view was that the Hornet was a new carrier, and we were in the Pacific. Mm-hmm. And we were going to go to some island that they wanted us to fly off of and fight the war. And that's
So when you heard we're destination Tokyo, what were you scared? Were you thrilled? Happy? What?
Well, I don't know, and none of us, even Doolittle, had been under combat before, but that can change the direction of our thinking. Mm-hmm. That, hey, we might not have a chance to do anything, or we're going to be in trouble, and all kinds of questions that came up. But there was a lot of jubilation by the Navy that we were headed for Tokyo. And after a while, everybody decided, I guess, that they had better start thinking about something else, because this is serious business. So, did that, but you're actually scared all the time. It's a kind of under the cover scare. It turned out that it was successful for us, and we ended up getting back to the States one time or another.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, did of the 80 or the 79 other guys that flew with you, did any of them become like best friends, or did you become better friends with gentlemen from other missions?
Well, after, because things were kind of mixed up, we went in different directions. It was gentlemen that just had part in that mission.
Okay.
Most of them went to North Africa. The 26 that stayed there, they were split up in different organizations and so forth, and did their part then there in China and India and Burma, and kept active in the war.
Did you ask him who else?
Who did the other Raiders, did they become his best friends? Did he make
Later on, Dad never flew with the other Raiders again.
That was the last mission.
But some of them did, because they go to North Africa.
Right.
And about 10 of them, there were no planes and no supplies in India, Burma, China, even though there was a war going on, okay? And they were the end of the earth, no matter what, all right? Mm-hmm. But Dad became friends. The ones that ended up in B-25s flying out of Kunming, those guys, there was about 10 of them, Raiders, that were together, okay? So they had a camaraderie going on, all right? But the 6 that went to fly the hump, 3 or 4 of them were navigators, and they didn't use navigators flying the hump, so they went back over to Kunming because they all wanted flying time. They all had to find a place to work, okay? And that's what they were doing, because they didn't have planes. And then two others, which I think was Shorty, Manch, and McElroy. McElroy had injured his back, and flying the hump took six hours to go over the hump. And it was too long of a plane ride for him to be able to fly the hump. So he ends up flying in Burma, bombing, in India, bombing Burma. Those were shorter runs when more B-25s came in. And Shorty Manch ends up in B-25s in Kunming, flying in Western China to Eastern China.
So, okay, now, you met Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek and his wife. Is it Lady Kai-shek?
Madam.
Yeah.
Madam Kai-shek?
We had the pleasure of meeting the madam. We did not have the opportunity to meet Chiang Kai-shek.
Oh, you didn't get to meet him, but you met the Madam Kai-shek. So what, now that was was it a dinner to honor?
Well, it was at the place that they had elected to be the second government while the Chongqing and the rest of it.
Okay. So now your daughter Cindy Chal, thank you also for being here and helping out with this. She said that you took place in the invasion of Burma. So you decided, okay, you're here. You're in the China-Burma-India theater. So,
When we got orders to go home, there were quite a few of us that had experiences in that area.
Okay.
No, Phil Cochran and John Allison, in the meantime, had been chosen to establish a airborne arrangement for the troops that were marching into Burma.
Okay.
There had been four attempts, and all of them had to turn back. It was a pretty brutal assignment, because you moved along on the ground. If you became injured, there was no medical help, and if it was looked pretty bad, you were parked by a tree with a gun and a few substantial things that you might need, and they moved on. And Cochran and Allison were chosen to come up with some kind of arrangement that would give the ground troops air support. So they formed what they call the First Air Commando Group. It was made up of B-25, C-47, P-51s, a lot of little L-1s and L-5s, L-4s. We had C-47s specially equipped with a pickup reel, which you could pick up a glider from the ground. And it was chosen to invade Burma. Okay. The way it was arranged is that small equipment, civil engineer people with bulldozers, rollers, and scrapers, whatever they need, they would invade Burma behind the Japs' line, about a couple 100 miles. After selecting a place, they found a place called Broadway that they thought might be the one. So on the night of March the 6th in 43, 44, and we invaded Burma, and the way it worked out is that previously the engineers would have make a landing field. Okay. And in the meantime, Colonel Allison, who flew one of the gliders in on the invasion night, was that he would set up a system that the gliders would release at a certain place. Well, about 5:30 that afternoon, a picture was taken of the field, but they thought they were going to invade it. Well, there are a lot of mahogany logs had been spaced here and there that disrupted the space that they needed. And there was another field that they were planning on doing that, and it ended up, we finally had to go into Broadway. Well, the place that Allison had expected for the gliders to release became useless because the people going on that airplane, that glider, had brought in a lot of extra stuff, and it was
didn't flow too well.
it screwed that up. So, but anyway,
They realized it made them too heavy.
Right.
But what he was talking about in Broadway, they don't know if the Japanese came in and took the mahogany logs and laid them on the field, or if the local farmers brought them because they were drying them. Okay, they don't know who did it, but that's what they were doing was in the gliders was equipment so that these men could get out, come in, get out, and build an airstrip in 24 hours so that the invasion can happen and the wounded, they could bring in supplies that way, turn around, pick up the wounded, and get them out of there.
Right.
That's what that was all about.
Okay.
And it ended up happening, but they had glitches.
Now you were friends with Tex Hill. Now when did they meet here in Texas, or was it in China? And did you also meet Claire Chennault? Now, these gentlemen I'm mentioning, Tex Hill, Claire Chennault, were with the Flying Tigers.
Tex Hill, yes. Chennault, no, I never know.
You never met Chennault, but you met Tex Hill.
But my roommate, Jake Sartz, flew Chennault around for a while until Chennault got somebody he liked her. I don't know the circumstances, but he did fly Chennault around.
Okay. Now, now y'all trained in short runways, so you had
Are
to.
you back to the raid?
Yeah.
I'm back to the raid now. Yes.
Yeah.
Did y'all want to stick to?
We'd go in and land and then take off every bird.
Okay.
You tell him. You have
Okay.
to tell him you're back at Eglin.
Okay. Now we're going to talk back again about the Doolittle Raid. Okay. Now on the Doolittle Raid, when you trained to take off from a very short runway, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you know that this was an aircraft carrier that you were going to be practicing? That it's emulating an aircraft carrier, or did you? I mean, what was your thoughts as to why are we taking off a short runway?
Well, first off, when the idea of an Army bomber taking off a carrier was thought up by a submariner.
Right.
Who Roosevelt liked the idea, and he said, do it.
Okay.
So all the Army pilots, including me, looked at the possibility of Army pilots, our Army airplane, taking off the carrier with a jaundiced eye. Because of the length of the runway. But the Navy sent a young Lieutenant Hank Miller down to teach us the technique of a carrier takeoff. What it amounted to was that in doing that, you would have a wind from the carrier, also from the Mother Nature. Okay, well, that's fine. The carrier is very short, and he was able to teach through this way. He taught us to be more finesse with the controls to actually take off and try and fly the force of the aircraft engine. And in doing so, you would have more a chance of survival than getting off very quickly. Then we were all able to do it after a few rides with Miller. And he rode with all the piloting crews.
Okay. So was he on the Hornet with y'all? Was he on the Hornet with you?
No.
He was on the Hornet.
But he, yeah, he did. He left. He was from Pensacola, and he was a young lieutenant, Hank Miller. Then he goes across country with them, and he told Michener he didn't want to get, because he was AWOL, and he didn't want to get in trouble. And Michener said, Michener was the head of the ship, okay, the commander of the ship. And Michener said, don't worry, you're not going to get in trouble. But he was there to see them take off, yes.
He was? Okay,
Yes.
so he saw the takeoff.
Yeah, he's been labeled in the picture, the group pictures.
Okay.
He was, yeah.
All right. So you took off. You flew, what was it? You took one flight around to let the others catch up, or did you just fly on straight to Tokyo and let the others catch up?
We couldn't fly in formation because we used too much fuel.
Right.
Okay, we took off, made a circle. The Navy held up a heads-up board, Tokyo, and we flew that course.
That set the compass.
Okay, that set the comp. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So how'd you use the bathroom during that time? Well, I'm sure a lot of people want to know.
What?
How did you use the restroom? Because it was a long flight.
I've never had or thought about addressing that problem.
I'm sure a lot of people have always wanted to know.
I don't know. I do not remember myself or Colonel Doolittle.
Okay. So,
They had to take off 12 hours or 8 hours ahead of time. And so they were just getting up. Dad was on his way to breakfast when they heard the announcement, all Navy pilots man their planes. So all of them,
The answer might be,
they didn't eat,
Is
they
it,
didn't have liquid.
oh, wow.
on the morning that they announced that us to take off, nobody had a chance to go to breakfast. So consequently, there was no coffee. And maybe that was the reason.
Okay.
And we did not have a thermos. If you were looking at the raid from the survival standpoint, we flunked the raid terribly. We had nothing.
Right.
They had a compass, a knife, They had
didn't
a
even have a King's canteen. Water.
okay. General Doolittle's plane was a little different because Dad was flying with the boss type thing, and the other guys were 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds. Of course, the same thing happened going in B-17s, and they were a little younger. But they did pass out sandwiches to the other crews. And one of the other crews, I think it was Greening, they were all excited that they'd bombed and everything, and they were flying, and they took the sandwiches out and started eating them, and it was like sawdust in their mouth because they had no saliva because of all the anxiety and stuff.
Right.
And so they couldn't eat the sandwich, you know. So, but the doctor did give them sort of medical kits, and supposedly there was a bottle of rye for every man on the plane. But Dad says there wasn't any liquor on his plane. He never knew.
Yeah,
You got
was
deprived. No,
it was an exhibition in the height of stupidity.
your motto should have been "No rye, no fly."
But they had no maps. They had the clothes on their back. Like I said, they had a .45, which was issued to everybody, and a knife, and they had no supplies at all. And they were not told how to bail out or anything. All they were given was a parachute, and they said, count to 10.
Oh.
Now, maybe all the guys, the B-17 guys, maybe nobody in Europe other than the paratroopers were taught about bailing out either, you know.
How did you bail out? Was it a window, Bombay door? How did you bail out?
The front part of the airplane went down through the hole in the navigator's well, and the people in the back went out to hold the back.
Okay. A little background. What had happened? And you can correct me if I'm wrong on some of these. They were supposed to take off 400 miles from Japan, and they were supposed to hit the targets around nighttime. Well, they were discovered by a Japanese, I think it was a merchant ship or a fishing boat.
Yeah, just a little. The Japanese had ships stationed in 4 different circles outside, and they had radios on them, and so that was their radar further out. And the Japanese knew that they were coming, but they had no idea that they were going to use bombers. Mm-hmm. And so the Japanese thought, well, we have another day to prepare, because they knew that the fighters could only go 300 miles in and back to the ship, or otherwise they have no place to land. So the Japanese just assumed they were going to use fighters coming in, and the difference was that the bombers had more fuel, but they were a good 200 miles further away from Japan. Mm-hmm. And General Doolittle's plane only had incendiary bombs on it. They only had 4 500 bombs, but each plane did carry 1 incendiary bomb. Mm-hmm. And that was that when General Doolittle went in first, he would give them the other 15 planes, a focal point to have, ability to, because the seas were rough, so all the navigation equipment, it was overcast, so they couldn't do celestial, they couldn't do reading other instruments because they were all covered with, they flew low, mm-hmm. and it covered so the navigators were flying by the seat of their pants.
Wow, okay.
So anyway.
All right, so you and Colonel Doolittle just took turns flying, from what I read in the book. And how many hours was it between the time you took off until you hit the target?
Well, let's go back about the mission. The mission was that we would land at a place in Chal. Mm-hmm. Gas up, and go to Kunming and become part of the Chinese effort. To do this, they had planned to have a homing station, portable homing station, at a place where we would enter China. Mm-hmm. Because that would be the place of the shortest fuel. Yeah. As we approached China, there was a big a warm front that Mother Nature gave us. Mm-hmm. It set things up so that things could go ahead and work. Well, on the way to China, the airplane carrying the homing station crashed, killed everybody aboard, and we had no homing station. Arriving over the Chinese coast, we could see lights here and there. The Japanese or the Chinese, thinking we were Japanese, cut down on all the lights. So we were flying in limbo. We had no other advantageous homing station within range. So our choice was to fly to where we're supposed to be, the gasoline, which was covered up by 30,000 feet of a big storm. Mm-hmm. So we couldn't have made an approach anyway.
Right.
So we ended up flying at a safe altitude above the terrain till we ran out of fuel.
And then you bailed out.
We bailed out.
Well, listen, we'll wrap this up. Is there anything that you want people to know? Anything extra that I may have missed? A question that you feel I should have answered or asked, so that people will know about this raid, this mission, and know about you? Anything that you want to tell the audience?
There's no need to know anything about me.
Well,
the name of the game was to win the damn war.
Win the war. Yeah. Okay. If you want to know more about the raid, the gentleman that they recommend, his name is Carol Glines. This is one of his books. He wrote several books, but he wrote two books that I'm aware of. This one called The Doolittle Raid, and then the other one was called Doolittle's Raiders. Or Doolittle's. I have one that's called Doolittle's Tokyo Raiders. Yeah. So it's a little bit thicker of a book. Those are, if you really want to know about this mission, and I really think it'd be good for you to read about this mission, to see all the details, what went into it, and how it just baffled the Japanese, because they wanted to know, where did these bombers come from? And FDR said, Shangri-La. So, Colonel, I want to thank you very much. Very much appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. Cindy, Chal, your daughter.
There's a new children's book out that's pretty good too, and the guy's name is Nathan Hale, just like the Patriot from the Revolutionary War. But we've got it, and it's a pretty good little book. It's done in a cartoon thing, and so if you want to introduce it to kids and grandkids, that one might be interesting to get.
Okay, Nathan Hale. Yeah, all right, that was the spy, the spy who got hanged. Yeah. That's the gentleman who said, "I regret that I have but one life to give to my country." So, Nathan Hale. Okay, so that's a children's book.
It's his. He's a direct. Well, he's not a direct descendant because a young man died, but he's direct descendant of the family.
The family.
And he's written a couple of them, and we found this one lately, and it's real good. So.
Okay. All right, Colonel. Well, unfortunately, we don't have any rum here to that rum to drink.
Rye.
Was it rye? No. What was the one that
that was
there was
it was cognac.
Cognac. There was a plan that when I think there were the last two raiders were around, that they would toast the other 78 with cognac. Yeah. It was from 1895.
1896. General Hennessy. Someone in California gave General Doolittle a bottle that was laid down the year that he was born, which was 1896. Mm-hmm. And General Doolittle passed that bottle on to the Raiders. And the the Raiders were lucky enough that different towns and bases would invite them for reunions every April 18th. And Tucson, Arizona in '58 invited them and gave them silver little chalices, little cups that are at the Air Force Museum now. And
Which Air Force Museum?
Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio.
Dayton, Ohio.
Air Force Museum.
Okay, the Air Force
National
Museum
Museum of the Air Force.
in Dayton, Ohio. This
Yes.
is so that we can let them know.
And the Air Force considers them the Hope Diamond, okay? So, anyway, they would take those cups in 58 and 59. That started the tradition. And they would toast. They toasted anyway, but then they actually had little goblet things, chalices that they toasted out of. And then they would toast the men that had passed on, from the war, or, that had passed on from the raid. And then the last toast was done with this bottle that General Doolittle was given to General Doolittle on his 60th birthday.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much. And please stick around for a long, long time, because this country, this world needs men like you to continue to tell the story.
Well, I'm trying to.
103 years old, the last of the great men of the Doolittle Raid. Thank you again, Colonel. Appreciate it, and God bless you.